Welcome to this special episode of Evolution Now. I'm your host, Flora White, and today we're going to be talking about America in our 250th year. It's our birthday, and we're going to be celebrating our culture, our people, and all that makes us who we are. So let's hear some excerpts from conversations I've had over the past weeks, asking the question, who are we as a nation as we enter our 250th year?
American history is complicated, right? So, and it doesn't mean that it's someone's going to be at fault where we are today. What history is for us to look back and say, how can we not make the same mistakes that we made in the past? And how can we do and make improvements for the future in search of what we have in the United States, in search of a more perfect union? So for me, when I get a chance to go around the county, everyone feels strongly and proud to, first just to show up and talk to different people and understand that the work that we're doing is important, but it's for everyone.
The Ward House, which is a house that was the home of the town supervisor of Eastchester during colonial times, has quite a history as being, actually, I think it was the first post office in Westchester. The Ward brothers, one was a loyalist, one was a patriot. The property ended up not being included, and a developer bought the property with the intent of knocking down this historic home and building, whatever he was going to build there. Together with Tuckahoe and a group called Friends of the Ward House, and the county executive, so I had put into the budget a few years back some money to be able to save the Ward House, to acquire that so that the developer would not tear that down. Obviously, they didn't have tools like AI in the revolutionary times, and they didn't have it and there's quite a difference in the tools they used even from the time when the Lenape tribe was here. Technology advances, but at the end of the day, the history is how we learn and how we maintain our humanity.
Colin, what does this mean to where we are as a country now and our 250th birthday?
I'm critical of the country. I'm critical of the American evangelical tradition's involvement in that history. But I'm also very I'm proud to be an American, and I think that we've come a long way politically, socially, legislatively from where we started.
So Jimmy, as we come up on our 250th year of our beautiful country of America, what do you think about? What do you reflect on?
This country has come a long way, but we got to start to prepare for the next 250 years now and set the future forward in a good direction for future generations to come. So think about all the progress we have made and we will continue to make as a whole. We are not perfect at all. This is our home. And
our country has become increasingly complicated with continually evolving technology, the labor market, here at home. There are divides. Is it more complicated now than it was 250 years ago, 250 years into the future? How do you view this point in time?
I think in 250 years, they'll look back in the history books like, oh, wow, I wish we had that problem. Technology, business, everything is just moving at a rapid pace, and we're going to catch up, and we're going to make sure that we keep it spinning in the right way.
When it comes to the Immigration Protection Act, is there a concern that immigrants are taking jobs from Americans, from people who are born here?
It depends how you look at it, honestly. There are jobs that some people just, unfortunately, teenagers coming out of high school don't want anymore. I do think there's enough jobs to go around. It's just, who wants to do them.
We came here in 1999, and America opened the doors for us, for my family and I, which I am eternally thankful and grateful for that. And when I came here, coming from a country where everything is rejected just because you are a different nationality, you cannot learn in Albanian, you cannot own a property, you cannot get a mortgage in your name just because you're different nationality. So coming here and seeing everything in my fingertips, I'm like, this is the place to be, and this is the place to achieve your dreams. And we're very happy and glad to be in this country where everything is achievable. Every dream is, you can accomplish any dream without any limits, and that can happen only in the United States of America.
Colin, how will you be celebrating and commemorating the 250th anniversary of the United States?
So I'll probably be going to a lot of barbecues, a lot of cookouts, eating a lot of hot dogs.
Nice.
Hopefully find a place with good fireworks. But no, I think that, commemorating the 250th anniversary of our country is very important. I think it's something that we can all participate in a way that, we feel comfortable doing, because, we've come a long way. I don't want to over-dramatize the situation. When we talk about the 250th anniversary and we hear leaders, national leaders, political and religious leaders, talking about the rededication of this country to God, I'm not 100% sure what that means, because from a historical standpoint, it should not be something that the United States government pushes as a narrative of, number one, as a narrative that we are rededicating this to God, because we were never, in my opinion, dedicated it to God in the first place. When you look at the fact that the First Amendment of the United States Constitution contains within it the Establishment Clause, right? That there shall be no religion established, right? And that, or no established religion, however you want to say it. That the idea of dedicating or rededicating a country to God, I think, is inherently contradictory to the First Amendment, to the founders, or to the architects, the framers of the Constitution, which that no, we're not going to dedicate. We never dedicated the country to God. You're imposing this sacred belief that, God is not just God, but, the Christian God is stands at the top of the moral hierarchy, and that the United States, as a country of
immigrants,
of immigrants and of diverse beliefs,
right,
and traditions and ways of life, is somehow subject to that God. And so the idea of rededicating the country to God is, in my opinion, it's a
false premise.
It's a false premise, exactly.
Don't bring that to the barbecue.
Don't bring that to the barbecue.
I was actually driving the garbage truck when I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about how AI is taking over everything. So I put a bill forward, to put into a law that we cannot, as a government, take AI and replace people. It's as a clerk or a DSS worker or whatever the job is in Westchester County, we need to protect our own employees. And I do feel that as some companies do try to cut costs, there's still some human, factor you can't take out. I think AI is very useful, but it should be only as a tool, shouldn't be a replacement. It's something that's going to be around forever. It's here. We have to deal with it, but we have to regulate it. We can't afford to lose a workforce. Our employees in Westchester County are very valuable. They have expertise that some people can't pick up or, just do on a click of a drop of a pen, whatever it is. That's their goal, to protect our own.
The thing that I hear most about AI, and it's not directly related to the legislation I passed, but it's other things that I'm working on, is people being afraid for their jobs, or afraid for their, humanity. I don't know how else to say it, afraid for the humanity, because it affects us in so many ways. I grew up in I had my own small business in the technology sector. Miracom Computer Corp. Yeah, we do controls and automation for the newspaper industry primarily, but some packaging as well. They were producing about 600,000 copies of New York Times per day in the Edison plant, and another few 100,000 copies on 43rd Street in Manhattan. And the 43rd Street plant didn't have the capacity to do color newspapers require towers that are multiple floors high, and so they put together this College Point plan to be able to do full color at the New York Times. We had pictures from like the 50s and stuff of what they used to call the flyboys before they even had stacking machines, where they literally have guys in their paper hats catching paper coming off the press line and stacking them to bundles. And now that's all automated. And everyone's like, well, all these jobs are going to go away. And that's not what happened. The jobs changed. And so, yes, we don't have flyboys catching paper. We have machines. But guess what? The machines need people to operate them. The machines need people to repair them. So we have that a lot today with AI, right? People are afraid their jobs are going to be gone. It's a very similar situation that I experienced, a slightly different side of it, 30 years ago or so when in this other industry or in this other thing. So the story is the same. But the result, I think, is also going to be the same. AI is going to evolve. A lot of the jobs that we know today are going to change. But it's not a perfect system. Make things faster, better, cheaper, but not at the expense of, jobs or people. But I had heard that there was a robocall where Biden was telling people, I forget exactly what it was. He was promoting something that was not him. It was not him. It was his voice generated by AI, and it fooled a bunch of people into, believing this campaign, and it was fake. It was a deep fake. Almost within a couple of weeks, that was January 2024 when that story happened. Within a couple of weeks, Taylor Swift was harassed, I don't know how else to say it, with an obscene video of her.
Also a deep
fake. There was gaps in the legislation that made it hard to protect people from these kinds of things happening. In my first term as a county legislator, in my role, I proposed legislation that ultimately was passed and signed in, actually, I think it was March of 2025. It might have been approved by the board in February and signed in March.
Unanimously?
Unanimously, yes, bipartisan. So I said, let's not focus on the means, right? On whether it's a chalkboard or a smartboard or Photoshop or AI. Let's focus on the intent. Anything digital, anything that's recorded digitally that is used for criminal intent is covered by this law. Whether it's a video, whether it's audio, whether it's an image, whether it's holography or some projected technology that we haven't even encountered yet.
Too often people think of the arts as a luxury or something for or that should be funded by the elite, but the reality of it is the arts are part of who we are. They're how we express ourselves individually. They're how we express our communities. They're how we bond as a community. So whether, it's the line dancing you do at a wedding or the song you're singing in the car, in the radio, on the way to work, the arts really are part of how we get through our everyday. You're kind of asking a question that's like where I get to can really nerd out on. Our title for the exhibition, Art in a Season of Revolution, actually comes from a book that was written about art in colonial America. And so just from a European tradition side, right? So where we started was the things that people wanted to invest in as art pieces were things like furniture, right? Things that were would sit well in a dining room, but that were really functional. And we didn't have, again, in a European tradition, the history of schools and academies. And so that's something that evolved. And then, where American art really gets loud and proud and recognized on an international scene is when we have, abstract expressionism, right?
You mentioned that there's an exhibit coming up that honors the 250th year of our country. When you look back at art as a retrospective in our nation, how do you view the evolution of art in America?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually my background as a sort of more academic art historian was in American art pre the Second World War. That's there's the Hudson River School, which, that's, the 19th century and paintings of landscapes, and embedded in that is, the concept of manifest destiny, and we should have everything from coast to coast. What I've been really excited about and seeing in the last few years is just really rethinking what is in the canon of American art, and not just thinking about it within a European visual language or just an exclusively white male visual language, but expanding that. And the Whitney Biennial has really been pushing and helping us think more openly about what American art looks like. And certainly it's something we are always thinking about at ArtsWestchester when we put together an exhibition. We often are working with themes. So we've done exhibitions on voting rights. So coming to what does the American Declaration of Independence mean now is something that is consistent with how we've been approaching exhibitions and seeking to bring as many voices to the table as possible. Chioma Nwana, who is just an absolute talent. She's a phenomenal photographer. Her work is about documenting Black joy and Black history. And so often those stories don't get told, but they're just exquisite photographs. And then we'll also have an installation by Christina Picciano, who was also an Arts Award winner, and that's the LGBTQ plus listening library. I think artists so wonderfully embody what the spirit of the founding of America are. They're creative, they're problem solvers, they challenge, right? They ask us to think more openly. They ask us to evolve, and so they're always pushing boundaries. And I think that's sort of what the American spirit is supposed to be, pushing and towards progress and ever upward. And to me, artists are so very that. They embody what we love about entrepreneurs. They're risk takers, and so I think, when you think about what is the American ideal, I think artists are so very much the embodiment of that.
It's not an act of charity to employ a person with a developmental disability. It's very good for the businesses as well. Again, there are unique skill sets that can be brought to the table that elevate the business. And that's feedback we get a lot from our local partners.
I have a son with autism, and I've watched him grow and develop, and now he works full-time for Regeneron. Am I allowed to say that?
Kudos.
Yeah.
So is Regeneron one of your corporate partners?
Yes, it's one of our flagship partners.
That's incredible.
Regeneron has 8 people employed that we support, and it's very, very exciting. They're warm, and they're welcoming to people with developmental disabilities. And we were talking about, an industry, biotech industry where you would think that it would be difficult for a person with disability to work in, and here we are. They're embracing our population, so we're very excited about that. And it just helps other organizations really to see the possibilities.
Are there any statistics that you can share to connect the dots for those who are watching and listening?
Well, as we know, autism is the rising disability diagnosis that we're seeing all over the world. And the statistics are really mind-boggling that now 1 in 4 may show, a birth may show signs of autism disorder. So 1 in 4 may have autism. One of the things that really is concerning right now is that some of the funds are available, whether it's a young child or whether it's an adult living with autism, that might be jeopardized in the future, is very concerning, because we've moved mountains in the last 80 years where we have seen people institutionalized just because they have autism, and now they are thriving, independently working full-time, and all because we've opened the community and the world to them, and we provided those supports. And they give, as I said before, they give back to society. They pay taxes.
You're redefining autism and what it means to live with autism. Autism is not necessarily a limitation in life. One can go on to thrive, to have a family, to be gainfully employed, and to live a satisfying, productive life.
Every day, I put my trust in the people that he spends his day with, and I try to live out what I would hope every family that entrusts the ArtsWestchester with their family members has come to expect from the people that they trust to support their people. So that grounds me, I think, in that aspect of our mission.
This generation of leaders is mission-driven, and they want to do purposeful work.
This is a very diverse workforce. They have different needs, they have different aspirations, but what the majority of them want is work-life balance. And that is something that the more seasoned generation has had a really hard time grasping and accepting and not being critical of. But we're a generation that's full of anxiety, that has worked so hard, first in the office, last to leave. The goals that motivated us are not the goals that are motivating this generation. And we need to understand that and respect that. Tremendous opportunities for people with disabilities. Tremendous opportunities if we really begin to address the impact of systemic racism. Our society, due to systemic factors, has redlined communities of color, has not invested in communities of color, and there is such greatness in those communities due to their experiences that we are not tapping into.
I don't believe that people are just born bad. I think for the most part, people have had life circumstances that have happened to them, which has created the trajectory of how their life has been. So with that being said, I do believe that most criminal offenses are born from circumstances. So it could be from hunger. Maybe you're stealing because there's some hunger issues. Maybe there's a lack of education, so you don't know any better, right?
Mental health.
There's mental health, of course. Yeah, there's also mental health issues that come into play. And if you haven't had either the money, resources, or family support to be able to recognize these things, then you may not have gotten the assistance that you need in that way. So there's all these different things that come into play which can drive someone to commit a criminal offense. And until you're faced with what those issues are and you're able to address them, you might continue in that loop of committing criminal offenses. Maybe these are first-time offenders, or maybe these are people who are kind of dipping their toes into these sort of crimes that they think may be easy to get away with. You may not have an opportunity for a second chance. There aren't always second chances. I want to say that when you are dealing with crimes that are very serious in nature, some of these sentences can be 25, 30 years. But with some clients, they need a little bit more. I had a client who was in the foster care system, and her first real interaction with someone who she felt like was family was me. She was 19. And then she called me, said to me, I look at you more as a sister because I haven't had that. And that hit me hard. And I looked and I said, you know what, I've given her hand-holding because I'm a hand-holding sort of attorney. But I was like, I don't think she just needs hand-holding. She needs a hug.
So again, the most effective resource that we have anywhere is the investments that we make in the people and relationships that we have.
There's a joke I make. I'm Jewish. My wife is Italian. In Italian, you say "sendan" to 100 years. That's the wish when you toast someone, at a birthday, for example. In Judaism, the wish is for 120. You should live to 120 years. May have Esrim. So I usually joke when someone says "sendan," I say, well, you should become Jewish because then you get 20 more years. I hope we get more than 250 years as a country, another 250 years as a country. We should go on for eternity and have the freedoms and wonderful things we have in the United States here for forever. So that's my blessing, my wish today.
We're going to do what we have to do to unite once again in any way possible way.